The clock on the prison wall ticks louder than it should. Each second is a countdown. At 6 a.m., Ben Ephraim will die. He doesn't cry, doesn't beg, doesn't rage against the injustice that stripped away his freedom, his reputation, his life. He just sits quietly in cell block D of Red Valley Penitentiary, staring at a worn photograph clutched between his calloused hands, a picture of himself and Shadow, his black German shepherd, taken 5 years ago outside his small auto shop in Brooklyn, before the councilman's murder, before the trial that became a media circus, before the world decided he was a monster. The fluorescent lights above buzz with a persistent hum that never stops, not even at night. Somewhere down the corridor, chains rattle. A door slams. Another inmate screams something incoherent into the pre-dawn darkness. But Ben doesn't hear any of it anymore. After 5 years on death row, the sounds of despair have become white noise. He traces his thumb over Shadow's face in the photograph. The dog's amber eyes stare back at him from the past, full of trust, loyalty, and something else. Something Ben has spent 5 years trying to understand. That day at the shelter, when Ben had knelt beside the scarred German shepherd everyone else had rejected, Shadow had looked at him like he could see straight through to his soul. Like he knew Ben's secrets before Ben even knew he had them. The photograph is creased down the middle from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. Ben's face in the picture is younger, lighter. Grease still stains his Carhartt jacket from a transmission job that morning. Shadow sits beside him, tongue out, tail midwag, captured in a moment when life still made sense. Before the lies. Before the evidence that appeared like magic. Before Officer Mendez became his shadow in this place. Footsteps approach. Heavy boots on linoleum. The rhythm is familiar. Warden Richardson, flanked by at least 2 guards. They always bring backup when they visit death row, as if a man hours from execution might suddenly discover superhuman strength and fight his way to freedom. The cell door buzzes. Metal scrapes against metal as it slides open with a hydraulic hiss. Warden Richardson stands in the doorway. A tall man with silver hair and a face carved from granite and 30 years of witnessing human suffering. His eyes are tired but not unkind. He carries a clipboard, because even death requires paperwork in triplicate. Ephraim, Richardson says, his voice carefully neutral. It's time to discuss your final requests. Ben doesn't stand. Doesn't acknowledge the warden's presence immediately. Just keeps looking at that photograph. Memorizing details he's memorized 10,000 times before. You get a meal of your choosing within reason, the warden continues, reading from his clipboard like he's reciting a grocery list. You can make one final phone call. You can request spiritual counsel. And you can have up to 3 approved visitors during your final hours. Ben finally looks up. His eyes are dark, hollow from years of fluorescent lighting and crushed appeals. But there's something else there too. Something that 5 years of concrete and steel haven't managed to extinguish. I want to see my dog. The corridor goes quiet. Even the distant screaming stops. One of the guards, a young officer Ben doesn't recognize, shifts uncomfortably, his hand instinctively moving toward his baton. Warden Richardson blinks. Once. Twice. Excuse me. Shadow, Ben says, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. My German shepherd. He's at Brooklyn Animal Haven in Williamsburg. I want to see him one last time. Richardson exchanges glances with the guards flanking him. Officer Mendez, who's been assigned to Ben's block for the past 3 years, steps forward. He's built like a linebacker, thick neck, arms like tree trunks, face that stopped registering emotion sometime in the last decade. But something flickers across his expression now. Something Ben can't quite read. Fear. Anger. Recognition. That's highly irregular, sir, Mendez says quickly, his words coming out too fast. We don't have protocols for. I'm not asking for a parade, Ben interrupts, his voice harder now, carrying the authority of a man who has nothing left to lose. I'm asking for 10 minutes with my dog. The only family I've got left. The only one who never lied to me. Never betrayed me. Never decided I was guilty because it made their jobs easier. The warden studies him in silence. The kind of silence that precedes either mercy or judgment. Mr. Ephraim, I understand you maintain your innocence. I don't maintain anything, Ben cuts him off. I am innocent. But that doesn't matter anymore, does it? In 6 hours, you're going to strap me to a table and pump poison into my veins for a murder I didn't commit. So yeah, I'd like to see my dog first. Not a steak dinner. Not a priest who'll pray for my soul. Not my ex-wife who testified against me to save her own skin. Just my dog. That's my final request. The silence stretches out like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. Mendez clears his throat, and Ben notices the way the officer's jaw clenches. Warden, the logistics alone, the transport, the security protocols, the time constraints. It can be done, Richardson says quietly, still watching Ben's face with an expression that might be respect or might be pity. We've accommodated stranger requests than this. Remember the inmate who wanted to see the ocean. He turns to Mendez, and his voice takes on the weight of command. Get animal control on the line. Coordinate with Brooklyn. If the dog is where he says it is, and if it's healthy enough for transport, bring it here. We'll do the visit in holding room C. Sir, Mendez starts, but the warden raises a hand. That's an order, Officer Mendez. Mendez's jaw tightens so hard Ben can see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. But he nods once, sharply, and walks away with footsteps that echo too quickly down the corridor. Like he's running from something. Or toward something. The warden makes a note on his clipboard, the pen scratching loudly in the sudden quiet. We'll need a few hours to arrange transport. Brooklyn to upstate is at least a 3-hour drive, possibly 4 with morning traffic. In the meantime, is there anything else you need? Ben shakes his head, still clutching the photograph like a lifeline. Just Shadow. He's all I want. He's all I've ever wanted. Richardson nods slowly, and for just a moment, the professional mask slips. Mr. Ephraim, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've sat with a lot of men in your position. Men who were guilty. Men who swore they weren't. Men who made peace with their fate and men who went screaming. And I'll tell you what I tell all of them. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. Use these last hours to make peace. With God. With yourself. With whatever happens next. I made peace a long time ago, Warden, Ben says softly, his eyes dropping back to the photograph. I'm innocent. And somewhere out there, the people who framed me are sleeping just fine tonight. Maybe they've even forgotten about the mechanic from Brooklyn they threw away like garbage. But I haven't forgotten. And neither has Shadow. The warden studies him for another long moment, then turns to leave. The cell door slides shut with that final terrible sound of metal meeting metal. The lock engages with a click that echoes like a gunshot. Ben is alone again. Just him and the photograph and the clock that won't stop ticking. He closes his eyes and tries to remember the last time he saw Shadow. It was the night they arrested him. The night Councilman Porter was found dead in that luxury construction site downtown. A bullet in his chest. Ben's prints on a gun Ben had never seen before. Ben's truck mysteriously at the scene. Everything lined up too perfectly. Too cleanly. Like pieces arranged by a chess master who'd been planning this endgame for months. Shadow had been in the truck that night. They'd been driving home from a late emergency job in Queens. Some corporate executive's daughter with a dead car battery at 11 p.m. Ben had stopped at a red light. Checked his phone for tomorrow's schedule. That's when the sirens came. That's when the police cars surrounded him like wolves circling prey. That's when his life ended. He remembers Shadow barking as they dragged him from the truck. Remembers the dog lunging against the window. Paws scrabbling desperately at the glass. Those intelligent amber eyes locked on his master being shoved into the back of a police car. The last thing Ben heard before they drove him away was Shadow's howl. Long and mournful and full of the kind of confusion dogs feel when the world stops making sense, when the human they trust more than their own instincts is suddenly taken away by force. Ben never saw him again after that night. His ex-wife Melissa had refused to take Shadow. That's your dog, she'd said during the one phone call she'd bothered to accept. I'm not dealing with your mess anymore. So Shadow had gone to the shelter. 5 years of concrete kennel floors and strange hands and the slowly dying hope that his person might come back. Until now. Until 6 hours before the end. Ben opens his eyes and looks at the photograph one more time. "Hold on, boy," he whispers to the image, his voice cracking. "Just a little longer. I'm coming. Or you're coming to me. Either way, we'll see each other one more time. I promise." The clock keeps ticking. Somewhere in Brooklyn, a phone is ringing at an animal shelter where a tired night supervisor is about to receive the strangest transport request of her career. Somewhere in Red Valley Penitentiary, Officer Mendez is making a call of his own, his voice low and urgent, speaking to someone who doesn't want to hear that a dog is about to be brought into the prison. And somewhere in a cramped apartment downtown, Detective Clara Hoyt is staring at a cold case file she can't seem to let go of. A file marked Reed Benjamin, Councilman Porter murder, that has too many unanswered questions for a case the department called open and shut. The pieces are moving. The countdown has begun. And in a kennel in Williamsburg, Shadow, a scarred black German shepherd with amber eyes that have seen too much, suddenly lifts his head from his worn blanket. His ears perk forward. His body goes rigid with attention, as if he's heard a voice calling across the miles and the years and the injustice. His master's voice. After 5 years of silence, Shadow stands slowly, arthritis making the movement careful, deliberate. He walks to the front of his kennel and stares at the door with an intensity that makes the other dogs fall quiet. Waiting. Because somewhere deep in his bones, in that place where loyalty lives alongside instinct, Shadow knows. Today is the day everything changes. Outside Ben's cell, 2 guards stand in the shadow of the corridor. One of them, the young officer who'd shifted uncomfortably earlier, leans toward his partner and whispers, "You think he knows?" The older guard, a veteran of 15 years at Red Valley, glances back toward Ben's cell and murmurs quietly, "He's not supposed to." But what if the dog? "The dog's just a dog," the veteran says, but his voice lacks conviction. "It won't change anything." In the darkness of cell block D, Ben Ephraim clutches his photograph and waits for dawn. He doesn't know that Shadow's return will ignite a chain of events that will expose corruption reaching into the highest levels of the justice system. He doesn't know that the dog he saved from a shelter 5 years ago is about to save him in return. He doesn't know that some truths can't be buried forever, no matter how deep the grave. All he knows is that in a few hours, he'll see those amber eyes one more time. And somehow, in a way he can't explain, that has to be enough. The clock ticks towards 6 a.m. But this story, it's just beginning. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to smash that subscribe button for more. Also, share your thoughts and let me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow's story is going to be just as epic, so don't miss out. Now, let's continue. 4 hours until dawn. 4 hours until the state of New York straps Ben Ephraim to a gurney and ends a life for a crime he didn't commit. But right now, in a cramped animal shelter in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, a different countdown is happening. Shadow stands at the front of his kennel, body rigid, ears locked forward like radar dishes. The night supervisor, a woman named Rita Delgado who's worked at Brooklyn Animal Haven for 12 years, pauses mid-rounds. She's seen thousands of dogs in thousands of moods, but this is different. Shadow isn't barking, isn't whining. He's just standing there, staring at the door with an intensity that makes the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "Easy, boy," Rita murmurs, approaching slowly. "What's gotten into you?" Shadow doesn't acknowledge her. His amber eyes remain fixed on the door, unblinking, waiting for something. Or someone. Rita checks her clipboard, though she's memorized this dog's file years ago. Shadow. Black German shepherd. Age approximately 10. Owner incarcerated. Benjamin Ephraim. Convicted of murder. She'd watched the trial on the news 5 years ago, remembered feeling a sharp pang of sorrow for the dog when they showed footage of him being removed from the impound lot, still wearing his service vest, still searching for the master who would never come. 5 years this dog has waited. 5 years of potential adopters passing him by because he's too old, too big, too battle-scarred. 5 years of watching other dogs leave with families while he stayed behind, that hope in his eyes slowly dimming like a candle burning down to nothing. Except tonight that hope is blazing. Rita's phone buzzes. Unknown number. She considers ignoring it. Nothing good comes from calls at 2:47 a.m. then sighs and answers. Brooklyn Animal Haven, this is Rita. This is Officer Mike Chen, New York State Department of Corrections. The voice is clipped, official, the tone of someone who's made difficult calls before. We need to arrange immediate transport for a canine in your facility. German Shepherd. Name Shadow. Owner Benjamin Ephraim. Rita's breath catches. Transport where? Red Valley Penitentiary. Upstate. We need him there in 3 hours. 3 hours? That's impossible. Red Valley is 4 hours minimum at this time of. She stops, the implications sinking in like ice water. Wait. Ben Ephraim. His execution. That's today. Yes, ma'am. A pause, and Chen's voice softens almost imperceptibly. The inmate has made a final visit request. We're obligated to honor it if logistically feasible. Final visit. The words hang in the air like smoke. Rita looks at Shadow, still standing at rigid attention, still staring at that door. 5 years this dog has waited with the patience of stone. 5 years of loyalty to a man the world decided was a murderer. And now, in the last hours before they kill him, they finally get to see each other again. She doesn't know if it's mercy or the cruelest thing she's ever heard. I'll get him ready, Rita says quietly, her throat tight. But I'm coming with him. That dog doesn't know your people. He knows me. That's acceptable. Transport will be there in 20 minutes. The line goes dead. Rita stands motionless for a moment, then walks to Shadow's kennel. The dog finally turns his head to meet her gaze, and what she sees in those amber eyes stops her cold. It's not the dull resignation she's grown accustomed to over 5 years. It's something fierce, awake, purposeful, like he's been waiting for this exact moment, preparing for it. Looks like you're going home, boy, she whispers, her voice cracking. Or as close to home as you're gonna get. Shadow's tail lifts. Not a wag exactly. More like acknowledgement. Like a soldier receiving orders. The transport van pulls up to Red Valley Penitentiary at exactly 5:47 a.m. 13 minutes before Ben Ephraim's scheduled execution. The sky is starting to lighten. That gray pre-dawn that feels like the world holding its breath. Rita climbs out, Shadow on a lead beside her. The dog hasn't made a sound during the entire drive. Just sat perfectly still, watching the landscape change from city to highway to the imposing walls of the prison rising like a fortress against the dying night. 2 corrections officers meet them at the gate. The shorter one, Sergeant Torres, eyes Shadow warily. That's a big dog. He's gentle, Rita says, though her hand tightens on the lead. Shadow's body has gone tense, every muscle coiled. His nose works overtime, processing 1,000 scents. And something in the way he's holding himself, ears slightly back, weight balanced, reminds her of the police dog she's seen preparing to track suspects. We'll need him muzzled during entry, Torres says. Protocol. Rita starts to protest, but Shadow accepts the muzzle without resistance. His eyes, though, never stop scanning. Watching. Remembering something Rita can't see. They're escorted through security. Metal detectors, multiple checkpoints, layers of doors that clang shut with terrible finality. Shadow walks beside Rita with military precision, his claws clicking rhythmically on the linoleum like a metronome counting down. Inside Red Valley, the air is different, thick with decades of desperation, sweat, and institutional disinfectant. Other inmates press against their cell bars as Shadow passes, their faces showing something Rita never expected to see in a maximum security prison. Softness. Wonder. A brief respite from their own hells as they watch this dog walking toward a reunion most of them will never have. They reach holding room C at 5:53 a.m. 7 minutes. Through the reinforced glass, Rita can see Ben Ephraim. He's thinner than in the news photos from 5 years ago, his face carved down to bone and shadow. His orange jumpsuit hangs loose on a frame that's forgotten what freedom tastes like. But when the door opens and Shadow enters the room, something changes in Ben's eyes. Something that 5 years of concrete and steel couldn't kill. Shadow, Ben breathes, pressing both palms against the glass barrier. Oh God. Shadow. 4-3 heartbeats. Shadow stands frozen. His entire body goes rigid. His head tilts slightly, processing. Then recognition explodes through him like electricity. The dog's tail begins wagging so hard his entire back end swings. He pulls against the lead, a high whine building in his throat, not distress but desperate joy. Rita releases him, and Shadow rushes to the glass, paws up on the barrier, trying to reach the man on the other side. His nose presses against the bulletproof surface, leaving wet prints, his whole body trembling. "I missed you so much, buddy," Ben sobs, his hands matching Shadow's paws on opposite sides of the glass. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I left you." Shadow whines again, pawing frantically at the glass, trying to break through, trying to reach the one person who ever mattered. The reunion should be beautiful in its tragedy. A condemned man and his loyal dog, separated by glass and injustice, saying goodbye. But then Shadow's body changes. It happens in an instant. His ears flatten. His lips pull back from his teeth. His hackles rise in a ridge down his spine. And he turns, slowly, deliberately, away from Ben and toward the observation window at the back of the room. Toward Officer Mendez. The growl that comes from Shadow's chest is nothing like the happy whining from seconds before. This is primal, ancient. The sound a wolf makes when it recognizes the hunter who killed its pack. It echoes off the concrete walls like rolling thunder. Rita stumbles backward, genuinely frightened. Shadow, no. But Shadow isn't listening. His entire focus has locked onto Mendez with laser precision. The officer has gone pale, his hand moving instinctively toward his baton. "What's wrong with him?" Mendez asks, but his voice is too tight, too high. Ben presses harder against the glass, reading Shadow's body language with the fluency of someone who's spent years training with this dog. "Shadow, what is it? What do you see?" Shadow lunges. Not at the glass separating him from Ben, but at the observation window. At Mendez. His full weight hits the reinforced panel hard enough to make it shudder. He's snarling now, teeth bared, every muscle in his body coiled with rage or recognition or memory. "Get that animal under control." Mendez shouts, backing toward the door. His face has gone from pale to gray. Guards rush in, grabbing for Shadow's lead, but the dog is beyond control. He's barking now, sharp, aggressive sounds that echo down the corridors like gunshots. Ben is shouting Shadow's name. Rita is frozen, watching this calm, patient animal transform into something wild. "Remove the dog immediately." Mendez orders, his voice cracking. Four guards finally get the lead secured. They drag Shadow toward the exit, and the dog fights every step, his eyes never leaving Mendez's face. His barking continues, echoing through the halls like an alarm, like a warning, like an accusation. "Shadow!" Ben screams, his entire body pressed against the glass. "What did you see? What do you remember?" But then, in the chaos of barking and shouting and guards pulling, Shadow does something that makes Ben's blood run cold. As his paws scrabble against the concrete floor, fighting the guards, he's not just struggling randomly. He's scratching. Deliberately. Frantically. His claws carve lines in the thin layer of dust and grime. Lines that point directly at Mendez's boots. Ben sees it. His shouting stops abruptly. His eyes go wide with understanding. Because Ben knows Shadow. Trained with Shadow. Knows what those scratches mean. Shadow used to do that at the shop when he found something important. A drop tool, a lost part, something humans missed. Shadow isn't being aggressive. He's communicating. He's trying to tell Ben something about Officer Mendez. Something he remembers. Something that's been locked in his canine memory for 5 years, waiting for this moment. The guards finally drag Shadow out of the room, his barking fading down the corridor. The door slams shut. Silence crashes down like a physical weight. Ben stands at the glass, breathing hard, staring at those scratch marks on the floor. Rita remains near the wall, shaking, trying to understand what just happened. And Officer Mendez, still pale as death, backs out of the observation room without another word. In the sudden quiet, Ben whispers to the empty air. "You remember something, don't you, boy? You remember who?" The clock on the wall reads 5:58 a.m. 2 minutes. Outside in the corridor, Shadow is still barking, the sound echoing through Red Valley Penitentiary like the voice of truth itself, demanding to be heard before it's too late. And somewhere in the facility, Officer Mendez locks himself in a bathroom, pulls out his phone with trembling hands, and makes a call he hoped he'd never have to make. "We have a problem," he whispers into the phone. The dog remembers. The execution didn't happen. At 5:59 a.m., Warden Richardson's phone rang. The red phone, the one connected directly to the governor's office. The stay came through with 60 seconds to spare. Temporary postponement pending review of new evidence. 24 hours. Ben Ephraim got to live another day. But as the guards escorted him back to his cell through corridors still echoing with Shadow's barking, Ben couldn't shake the image of those scratch marks on the floor. Couldn't forget the pure recognition in Shadow's eyes when he'd looked at Mendez. Not fear. Not random aggression. Recognition. The kind that comes from memory. Hours crawl by and death rode differently than in the outside world. Each minute stretches like taffy, elastic and suffocating. By the time midnight rolls around, Ben has worn a path in his cell from pacing. The temporary stay is a gift and a curse. Hope is more painful than resignation ever was. Footsteps approach. Not the heavy boots of guards, but softer steps. Father Andrews appears at the cell door, his weathered face grave in the dim fluorescent light. "Ben," the chaplain says quietly, "I have something for you." Through the bars, he passes a plastic evidence bag. Inside is a jacket. Ben's old Carhartt work jacket, the brown one with reinforced shoulders and grease stains that never quite washed out. The one he was wearing the night they arrested him. Ben takes it with trembling hands. "I thought they destroyed this years ago." "It was supposed to be," Father Andrews says carefully, "but I found it in evidence storage today while looking for something else. Someone filed it as personal effects to be returned upon execution. I thought you should have it now. Whatever time you have left." Ben holds the jacket up to the light. It smells like evidence bags and old motor oil and the ghost of the life he used to have. His fingers find the hole in the left pocket where he'd caught it on a carburetor years ago. The frayed cuffs from 1,000 days under cars. This jacket had been with him through deployments, through building his business, through meeting Melissa. Through the night everything ended. "Thank you, Father," Ben whispers. The chaplain nods, then glances down the corridor where a guard is making rounds. "There's something else." He lowers his voice. "I'm bringing Shadow back. Just for a few minutes." The warden agreed. She saw what happened this morning. She thinks the dog might be trying to tell us something. Ben's head snaps up. Shadow. Now. He's been agitated all day. Won't eat. Won't settle. Rita from the shelter thinks he needs to see you again or he might hurt himself. Father Andrews' eyes hold something Ben can't quite read. "And frankly, son, I think that dog knows something we don't." 10 minutes later, Shadow pads into the cell block, Rita holding his lead. The German Shepherd moves differently now. Purposeful, focused. When he sees Ben holding the jacket, his entire body goes rigid. "Easy boy," Rita says, but Shadow is already pulling toward the cell. Ben kneels, pressing the jacket against the bars. "It's okay, Shadow. Remember this? Remember this old thing." Shadow's nose hits the jacket like a bullet. He inhales deeply, his whole body trembling. Then he starts pawing at it. Frantically, desperately, the same behavior from this morning but more intense. "What is it?" Ben asks, watching Shadow's claws catch on the fabric. "What do you smell?" Shadow whines, a high distressed sound, and suddenly lunges forward. His teeth catch the bottom hem of the jacket and he pulls, hard enough that Ben nearly loses his grip. "Shadow, no," Rita starts. But Ben understands. "Let him. He's trying to show me something." Shadow's teeth tear into the lining of the jacket, ripping through the aged fabric with single-minded determination. His paws work in tandem, shredding, digging, exposing the layer between outer shell and inner lining. And then something falls out. It hits the concrete floor with a metallic clink that echoes through the silent cell block. Everyone freezes. Ben stares at the object on the ground. Small. Brass. Cylindrical. A spent bullet casing. Father Andrew's breath catches. Rita's hand covers her mouth. Shadow sits back on his haunches, looking at Ben with those amber eyes that hold too much knowledge for an animal. Ben's hands shake as he reaches through the bars, picks up the casing. It's cold against his palm. He holds it up to the light, reading the stamp on the bottom. .45 ACP, he whispers. The murder weapon, the gun they said had his prints, was a 9mm. This casing is from a completely different caliber. A different gun. Someone planted this, Ben says, his voice hollow with shock. Someone put this in my jacket. But why? Why hide evidence that would? He stops, the implications crashing over him like a wave. Unless they weren't hiding evidence. Unless they were planting it on me for later. In case the first frame didn't stick. Father Andrews grips the bars. Ben, this changes everything. This proves there was another weapon at the scene. This could prove I was set up, Ben finishes, staring at the casing. His mind is racing now, connecting dots he couldn't see before. The night they arrested me, I'd just finished a job in Queens. I stopped at a red light maybe 6 blocks from the construction site where they found the councilman. That's when the cops surrounded me. You were near the scene, Rita says carefully. I was near the scene, Ben confirms. But I wasn't at the scene. I never went inside that site. Someone saw me driving nearby, someone who needed a fall guy, and they made their move. He looks at Shadow. But you were there, weren't you, boy? You were in the truck with me. Shadow whines softly, pressing his nose against the bars. Dogs remember scents, Father Andrew says slowly, his voice taking on an edge of certainty. For years. Decades even. If Shadow was there that night, and if someone else was there, someone who fired a .45, he'd remember the smell, Ben breathes. Gunpowder. Sweat. Fear. He'd remember everything. As if in answer, Shadow suddenly goes rigid again. His ears flatten. His hackles rise. And he turns toward the guard station at the end of the corridor, just barely visible through the bars, where Officer Mendez stands. Shadow's lips pull back in a silent snarl. Then he barks, once, sharp and guttural, a sound like a gunshot in the quiet cell block. The bark echoes off concrete walls, accusatory and certain. Mendez is watching them. Has been watching them the entire time. In the dim light, his face is pale as chalk, his hand resting on his belt near his service weapon. His eyes are locked on the bullet casing in Ben's palm. For 3 seconds, nobody moves. Nobody breathes. Then Mendez turns and walks away, his boots echoing too quickly down the corridor. Not the measured pace of a guard on duty. The rapid steps of someone fleeing. Father, Ben whispers, never taking his eyes off the empty guard station. I need you to get this casing to someone. Detective Clara Hoyt, she worked the original case. She might. I know who she is, Father Andrew says, already pulling out his phone. And Ben, that dog of yours just identified the man who framed you. Shadow sits at attention, still staring down the corridor where Mendez disappeared. Still remembering. Still knowing. Somewhere in the prison, a door slams. An engine starts. And Officer Mendez makes another phone call, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic. The jacket. The dog found something in the jacket. We need to move. Now. Before this falls apart. The voice on the other end is cold. Calculating. How bad? Bad enough that in 12 hours, everyone's going to know the truth. A pause. Then we have 12 hours to make sure that doesn't happen. The line goes dead. In his cell, Ben Ephraim holds a bullet casing that will either save his life or get him killed. And Shadow, pressed against the bars, keeps watch over his master like he's done for 5 long years, waiting for the moment when loyalty becomes justice. Father Michael Andrews had been a prison chaplain for 22 years. He'd heard confessions that would make seasoned detectives weep. He'd sat with men who'd done unspeakable things and men who'd been destroyed by unspeakable things done to them. He'd learned to read guilt in the lines around a man's eyes, in the way hands trembled or stayed steady when speaking truth. Ben Ephraim's hands never trembled when he proclaimed his innocence. That had always bothered Father Andrews. Not because he doubted Ben, but because it meant somewhere in the system someone was very good at lying. Now, at 1:47 a.m., the chaplain stood in the shadowed hallway outside the prison administration offices, that old instinct prickling at the back of his neck. He'd come to retrieve a Bible he'd left in the warden's conference room earlier. What he found instead was Officer Mendez, alone in the staff break room, hunched over the wall-mounted phone, speaking in urgent whispers. Father Andrews froze in the doorway, hidden by shadows. "Don't care what precautions were taken," Mendez hissed into the receiver. "The dog's reaction could ruin everything. We should have gotten rid of it years ago when we had the chance." The chaplain's breath caught. He reached slowly into his cassock pocket, fingers finding the small dictaphone he used for recording sermon notes. Ancient technology, but it still worked. He pressed record. "No, listen to me," Mendez continued, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "That animal went straight for me. Like it knew. Like it remembered. And now they found something in the jacket. I don't know what, but the way Reed looked at it." A pause. "What do you mean, what jacket?" "The evidence jacket. Someone filed it wrong. It was supposed to be destroyed years ago." Silence as Mendez listened. Father Andrews could see the officer's reflection in the darkened window. Jaw clenched, free hand balled into a fist. "If the truth gets out, they'll bury us all," Mendez said finally, his voice dropping even lower. "Red Valley doesn't forgive mistakes. You know what happened to the last guy who talked." Another pause. "Yeah, exactly. So we handle this quietly. Before Hoyt starts digging again. Before anyone connects the dots." Hoyt. Father Andrews' mind raced. Detective Clara Hoyt. The woman who'd built the case against Ben. The woman whose testimony had been instrumental in his conviction. "The execution was supposed to happen this morning," Mendez continued. "One problem solved. But now we've got 24 hours and a dog that won't stop barking at me, and a chaplain who's too damn curious for his own good." He laughed, a sound without humor. "Yeah, Andrews. He was there when the dog went crazy. Saw the whole thing." The chaplain's blood ran cold. "I can handle Andrews," Mendez said. "Old man won't be a problem. It's Hoyt I'm worried about. She's been asking questions again. About the timeline. About the evidence logs." A longer pause. "I know Montgomery's people paid good money for this to go away clean. But nothing stays buried forever. Especially not with that damn dog scratching at the grave." Father Andrews' hand tightened on the dictaphone. Every word was being captured on tape, a confession, delivered in whispers and wrapped in paranoia. "Tomorrow night," Mendez said finally, "after the second stay expires, we make sure Reed doesn't get a third chance. And we make sure anyone asking questions understands the cost of curiosity." He hung up without a goodbye. Father Andrews pressed himself against the wall as Mendez exited the break room, boots echoing down the corridor in the opposite direction. The chaplain waited until the footsteps faded, then looked down at the dictaphone in his trembling hands. Evidence. Real evidence. A confession that implicated not just Mendez, but an entire conspiracy. And Mendez had just threatened his life. The prison quiets down after 2 a.m. Even the insomniacs and the haunted eventually succumb to exhaustion. Father Andrews moved through the corridors with the practiced ease of someone who'd walked these halls for over 2 decades. Guards nodded to him. The chaplain was part of the furniture, invisible in the way clergy often are. He reached Ben's cell at 2:23 a.m. Ben was awake, sitting on his bunk, the bullet casing clutched in one hand like a talisman. Shadow had been taken back to the temporary holding area, but the dog's presence still seemed to linger in the air. "Father," Ben said, surprised. "It's late." "I know." Father Andrews glanced down the corridor, checking for guards. The nearest officer was 2 cell blocks away, doing crossword puzzles at his station. "Ben, I need you to listen very carefully and not react. Can you do that?" Ben's expression sharpened. "What's wrong?" "Everything," the chaplain whispered. He pulled the dictaphone from his pocket and passed it through the bars. "And nothing." This recording, it's Officer Mendez. Talking to someone about you. About the case. About making sure the truth stays buried. Ben took the device with shaking hands. You recorded him? By accident. Then on purpose. Father Andrew's weathered face looked older in the harsh fluorescent light. Ben, this goes deeper than we thought. Mendez mentioned Montgomery's people. The councilman who was murdered. Said they paid to make this go away clean. Montgomery was the victim, Ben said slowly. Why would his people need to? He stopped, understanding dawning. Unless he wasn't the target. Unless someone wanted him dead and needed a fall guy to take the blame. Listen to the tape, Father Andrews urged. But keep it hidden. Mendez threatened me on that call. Said I was too curious. If he knows I have this, then you're in danger. Ben gripped the bars. Father, you need to get out of here. Go to the police. Go to the media. Go anywhere but. I'm not leaving you, the chaplain said firmly. Not when we're this close to the truth. But I needed you to have this. Insurance. In case something happens to me. Ben's throat tightened. Father. Promise me you'll use it wisely. Not rashly. This tape is leverage, but it's also dangerous. There are people who will kill to keep it quiet. Father Andrews squeezed Ben's hand through the bars. I've walked these halls for 22 years, son. I've seen evil wearing uniforms and suits and smiles. I've seen innocent men die because the truth was inconvenient. I won't let that happen to you. Why? Ben asked hoarsely. Why risk yourself for me? The chaplain smiled sadly. Because I took an oath to serve God and truth. Sometimes they're the same thing. Sometimes they require the same sacrifice. He stepped back. Stay alive, Ben. Whatever it takes. Your dog didn't wait 5 years just to watch you die. Father Andrews turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Detective Hoyt, the one who testified against you. Mendez is worried about her. Said she's asking questions again. About evidence logs. About the timeline. Hoyt turned on me, Ben said bitterly. She helped put me here. Maybe, Father Andrews said carefully. Or maybe she's starting to see what was really done to you. People can change, Ben. Even cops who make mistakes. He walked away, cassock whispering against the floor. Ben watched him go, then looked down at the dictaphone in his hands. Small, plastic, ordinary, and potentially deadly. He pressed play, volume low, holding the speaker close to his ear. Mendez's voice emerged, tinny but clear. Dog's reaction could ruin everything. We should have gotten rid of it years ago. Ben listened to the entire conversation, his blood turning colder with each word. The casual discussion of murder. The reference to Montgomery's people paying for silence. The threat against Father Andrews. The mention of Detective Hoyt as a problem to be handled. When the tape ended, Ben sat in the dark, processing. This wasn't just Mendez. This was a conspiracy that reached beyond the prison walls. Into the police department. Into the construction industry. Into whatever corruption had surrounded Councilman Montgomery before someone put a bullet in him and framed a mechanic from Brooklyn. Footsteps approached. Different from Father Andrew's soft tread. Heavier. Deliberate. Ben quickly hid the dictaphone under his thin mattress. A figure stopped outside his cell. Female. Tall. Even in the dim light, Ben recognized her. The sharp angles of her face, the way she carried herself with weary authority. Detective Clara Hoyt. She'd aged since the trial. Lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Gray threading through her dark hair. But her eyes, those sharp investigator's eyes, were the same. Ephraim, she said quietly. Ben stood, every muscle tense. Come to watch me die up close? Make sure your case stays closed. Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe. Or guilt. I came because I was wrong. The words hung in the air like a confession. Wrong. Ben's voice was harsh. You testified that my story didn't add up. that the evidence was overwhelming. You helped convince that jury to send me here. I know. Hoyt moved closer to the bars, and in the better light, Ben could see she looked haunted. I know what I did. And I've spent the last 18 months trying to figure out why the case felt wrong. Why I couldn't sleep. Why every time I drove past your old shop, I felt like I'd missed something crucial. And now? Ben asked, not daring to hope. Detective Hoyt pulled a folder from her jacket. Now I've been through the evidence logs 3 times. And I found something. The murder weapon, the 9mm with your prints, was logged into evidence 48 hours before Montgomery was killed. Ben's world tilted. That's impossible. That's what I thought. But the timestamps don't lie. Someone entered that gun into the evidence system 2 full days before it was supposedly used in a murder. Which means it was planted, Ben finished. Someone planned this. Collected my prints somehow, put them on a gun, then logged it before they even killed Montgomery. Hoyt nodded grimly. You were right, Ben. You were right all along, and I was too focused on closing the case to see what was really happening. She pressed the folder against the bars. This is everything I found. Timeline discrepancies. Evidence anomalies. Financial connections between Montgomery and several police officers, including one who worked your case. Mendez, Ben said. Hoyt's eyes sharpened. How did you know? My dog remembered him. And Father Andrews just gave me a recording of Mendez confessing to the whole thing. For a moment, they stared at each other. Former adversaries united by the same terrible truth. Then we have 24 hours, Hoyt said quietly, to prove your innocence before they execute you. And Ben, they'll do everything in their power to stop us. These people have already killed once. They won't hesitate to do it again. Down the hall, a shadow moved. A guard who'd been watching, listening, running now to make a call. The game had changed. The hunters had become the hunted. And the clock was still ticking. Detective Clara Hoyt's apartment looked like a crime scene itself. Evidence files covered every surface. The kitchen table, the couch, even the floor. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, fueled by coffee and guilt that had been eating at her for 18 months. Now, at 3:14 a.m., she stared at a document that made her blood run cold. Evidence log #47B Montgomery. The murder weapon, a Glock 19, 9mm, serial number filed off, had been entered into the police database on October 14th at 11:47 p.m. Councilman Victor Montgomery was murdered on October 17th. 3 days later. How did I miss this? Clara whispered to the empty room. She'd reviewed this case 100 times during the trial, checked every piece of evidence, verified every timeline. But she'd never thought to check when the murder weapon itself had been logged. Why would she? The gun was found at the scene. Ben's prints were on it, open and shut. Except the gun had been in police custody before there was a murder to investigate. Her hands shook as she pulled up the chain of custody report. The officer who'd initially logged the weapon, claiming it was recovered from an unrelated drug bust, was listed clearly at the top of the form. Officer Luis Mendez. Red Valley Correctional Facility. Previously, Narcotics Division, NYPD. Son of a bitch, Clara breathed. She grabbed her phone, dialed the precinct. This is Detective Hoyt. I need to speak to Captain Morrison. Now. Detective, it's 3 in the morning. I don't care if it's Christmas. Get him on the phone. 2 minutes of hold music. Then Morrison's gravel voice. Hoyt, this better be good. The Benjamin Ephraim case. The execution is in, she checked her watch. 2 hours and 46 minutes. Sir, I have evidence the murder weapon was logged before the murder occurred. The case was fabricated. Silence on the other end. Then, Clara, we've been through this. You had doubts, I let you investigate, you found nothing concrete. The jury convicted. The appeals failed. It's over. Sir, the evidence log doesn't lie. Someone planted that gun, collected Ephraim's prints somehow, then used it to frame him for Montgomery's murder. And the officer who logged the weapon is currently working at Red Valley, where Ephraim is scheduled to die. That's a serious accusation. That's a provable fact, Clara shot back. I'm looking at the documents right now. Captain, an innocent man is about to be executed, and we have officers involved in the cover-up. I'm going to Red Valley. I need you to call the warden and the governor's office. We need another stay. Morrison sighed heavily. I'll make the calls. But Clara, if you're wrong about this, your career is over. If I'm wrong, my career should be over, she said. But I'm not wrong, sir. I should have been 3 years ago. She hung up and grabbed her jacket, her gun, her badge. The drive to Red Valley would take 90 minutes if she pushed it. 90 minutes to reach Ben before they strapped him down. Before they silenced the one man who could expose the whole conspiracy. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. Last warning. Clara stared at the message, then deleted it and pocketed her phone. She'd been a cop for 14 years. She didn't respond to threats. She responded to evidence. Inside Red Valley, Officer Luis Mendez stood at the security checkpoint, watching the parking lot through the monitor bank. His shift ended in 2 hours, right around the time Ben Ephraim's execution was scheduled to proceed. The temporary stay would expire at 6 a.m. unless someone interfered. Someone like the detective whose car had just pulled into the visitor's lot at 4:47 a.m. Mendez's jaw tightened. He pulled out his personal cell, the burner he kept for calls that couldn't be traced, and dialed a number he'd called too many times in the past 5 years. 2 rings. Then a voice, smooth and cold. It's early, Luis. She's here. Detective Hoyt. At the prison. A pause. I thought you said she'd backed off. She did. 4 months. But something's changed. She's carrying files, moving fast. She looks like someone who found something. Mendez glanced at the monitor again, watching Clara flash her badge at the gate guard. You said this was handled. You said after the execution it would all go away. It will. She's digging again, Mendez insisted, his voice rising. You said it was handled. The voice on the other end remained calm. Too calm. Then handle it permanently. Mendez's blood ran cold. What are you? You heard me. Accidents happen in prisons all the time, Luis. Inmates attack guards. Guards defend themselves. Sometimes civilians get caught in the crossfire. Pause, heavy with implication. Make sure Detective Hoyt understands the cost of curiosity. Make sure she doesn't leave Red Valley with those files. You're talking about killing a cop. I'm talking about protecting a very lucrative arrangement that has kept you comfortable for 5 years. Montgomery's development partners have invested millions in making sure certain investigations don't gain traction. They're not going to let one guilt-ridden detective destroy that. Because she suddenly grew a conscience. The voice hardened. Handle it, Mendez. Or we'll handle you the same way we handled that mechanic. The line went dead. Mendez stood frozen, the burner phone trembling in his hand. He'd signed on for evidence tampering. For looking the other way. For taking money to make sure Ben Ephraim stayed convicted and silent. But murder? Killing a detective? Movement on the monitor. Clara was through the gate, heading toward the main building. Mendez made a decision. He keyed his radio. Security, this is Officer Mendez. We have an unauthorized visitor attempting to access death row. Detective Clara Hoyt, NYPD. Detain her at the main checkpoint until I arrive. Do not let her past the security door. Copy that. What's the reason for detention? Mendez's mind raced. Possible interference with scheduled execution. Warden's orders. It was a lie. But it would buy him time. Time to figure out how to handle this. Time to decide if he was willing to cross the line from accomplice to murderer. Ben lay on his bunk, the dictaphone hidden beneath his mattress, Clara's folder tucked inside his pillowcase. Sleep was impossible. In 73 minutes, unless something changed, they would come for him. Strap him down. End this. Shadow was back in his cell. The warden had allowed it, a small mercy for a condemned man. The dog lay pressed against the bars, as close to Ben as the steel would allow. His amber eyes were open, alert, watching. Then, at 4:51 a.m., Shadow's entire body went rigid. His ears shot forward. His hackles rose in a ridge down his spine. And he began barking, not the excited barking from their reunion, but sharp, aggressive alarm barks that echoed through the cell block like gunshots. Shadow, what? Ben started. But the dog was on his feet now, barking continuously at the corridor. At something Ben couldn't see yet. His tail was straight, his body coiled, every instinct screaming danger. Other inmates began shouting, woken by the noise. Guards appeared, yelling at Ben to control his dog. I don't know what's wrong with him. Ben called back. He's sensing something. Shadow's barking intensified. Then Ben heard it. Raised voices from the direction of the main checkpoint. A woman's voice, angry and insistent. A man's voice, bureaucratic and blocking. I have evidence pertaining to an active death row case. You cannot prevent me from. Detective, I have orders to detain you until. Orders from whom? The warden. Let me speak to her. Clara. That was Clara Hoyt's voice. And Shadow knew. Somehow, the dog knew that danger was coming. That the people who'd framed Ben were making their move. That time had just run out. Ben pressed against the bars, trying to see down the corridor. Clara. I'm here. I have evidence too. More shouting. The sound of a struggle. Then Mendez's voice, sharp and commanding. Detective Hoyt, you're interfering with prison operations. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Touch me and you'll add assaulting an officer to your charges. Clara shot back. I know about the evidence log, Mendez. I know the gun was logged before Montgomery was killed. I know you're part of this. Silence. Terrible silence. Then Mendez, his voice deadly quiet. You should have stayed away, detective. Shadow's barking reached a fever pitch. He threw himself against the bars, desperate to reach the confrontation Ben couldn't see. Other dogs in the facility, the K-9 units, the therapy animals, began howling in response, as if Shadow's warning had triggered some primal alarm system. Ben grabbed the bars, shouting, Guards! Mendez is the one who framed me. He's going to hurt her. Someone stop him. Footsteps running. Multiple guards responding to the chaos. But would they reach Clara in time? And in the growing dawn light, somewhere in the prison's administrative wing, a phone rang in the warden's office. The governor's aide with news about the stay of execution. But Warden Richardson wasn't there to answer it. She was racing toward the checkpoint where one of her officers was about to commit murder in her prison. Shadow kept barking, kept warning, kept fighting to protect the humans who were finally listening to what he'd been trying to say for 5 long years. The truth was coming out, but the people who'd buried it were willing to kill to keep it down. And in 58 minutes, Ben Ephraim's execution was still scheduled to proceed. The confrontation at the checkpoint ended with Clara Hoyt in handcuffs. Not arrested, but detained for her own safety, as Mendez put it, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. 4 guards surrounded her, confiscating her files, her phone, her weapon. She fought every step, hurling accusations that echoed through the corridors. The gun was logged 3 days early. Check the evidence database. Mendez planted it. But bureaucracy moves slowly, especially at 5 a.m. in a prison preparing for an execution. And Mendez had seniority, had relationships, had 5 years of building trust with these guards. Detective Hoyt looked like a desperate cop trying to save a guilty man with last-minute theatrics. They locked her in a holding room. Alone. Cut off from the one man she'd come to save. At 5:15 a.m., they came for Ben Ephraim. The execution team assembled with practiced efficiency. The chaplain, Father Andrews, walked ahead, his weathered face carved with grief and determination. Behind him, 4 guards in crisp uniforms. And in the middle, Ben, shackled at the wrists and ankles, shuffling forward in the awkward gait of a man bound for death. Shadow walked beside him. The warden had granted this final mercy. The dog could accompany Ben to the chamber, would be with him until the very end. It was unusual, unprecedented. But Eleanor Blackwood had seen the way that dog looked at his master, and something in her refused to separate them now. Shadow pressed against Ben's leg with every step, whining softly. Not the aggressive alarm barking from earlier, but the distressed keening of an animal who understands loss is coming. "It's okay, boy," Ben whispered, his voice cracking. "You did good. You tried to tell them. That's all anyone can do." They moved through the corridors of Red Valley like a funeral procession. Inmates pressed against their bars, silent for once. Even the hardest men recognized the solemnity of this walk. Ben Ephraim had maintained his innocence for 5 years. Many believed him. But belief doesn't stop the machinery of justice once it starts grinding. The execution chamber waited at the end of the corridor, a room too clean, too bright, too clinical for what happened inside it. Through the observation window, Ben could see witnesses gathering. Media, prison officials, a few civilians whose faces he didn't recognize, and Officer Luis Mendez standing in the corner, sweat glistening on his forehead despite the room's chill. Ben's eyes locked on him. Even shackled, even hours from death, Ben's gaze carried the weight of accusation. "Whatever you did," Ben said quietly, but his voice carried in the silence. "It's coming out. The bullet casing. The recording. Detective Hoyt's evidence. You can kill me, but you can't kill the truth." Mendez's jaw clenched. His hand moved instinctively toward his belt, toward his service weapon. But he caught himself, forced his hand away. Too many witnesses. Too many eyes. The guards positioned Ben in the center of the chamber, began removing his shackles to transfer him to the gurney. Shadow circled anxiously, whining, trying to stay close. Then the lights flickered. Just once. A brief dimming, like the prison's electrical grid had hiccuped. Everyone paused, glancing up at the fluorescent fixtures. Shadow's ears shot forward. He barked once, sharp, commanding, and lunged forward, not at anyone, but at the metal supply table against the wall. "Shadow, no," Ben started. But the dog hit the table with his full weight, knocking it sideways. Metal instruments clattered to the floor. Syringes, for tubes, alcohol swabs. And something else. Something small and plastic that skittered across the tile. A digital recorder. Smaller than Father Andrew's dictaphone. More modern. Still recording, its red light blinking. Everyone froze. The recorder spun to a stop at Warden Blackwood's feet. She stared at it, then looked up at Mendez, whose face had gone white as bone. "That's not," Mendez started. "I don't know where that came from." "It fell from your pocket when the dog hit the table," one of the guards said slowly. "I saw it." Ben's heart hammered. The handcuffs rattled as he pointed at the device. "Play it. Whatever's on there, play it." The warden bent down, picked up the recorder. Her fingers found the playback button, but she hesitated, her eyes moving between Ben and Mendez. "Warden, that's personal property," Mendez said quickly. "You have no right to." "Play it," Ben repeated, his voice stronger now. "Please. If I'm going to die in 10 minutes, at least let me hear what he's been recording." "That's not how this works," Mendez insisted, moving forward. "Give me the recorder, ma'am. This is a violation of my privacy rights." The chamber doors burst open. Father Andrews stumbled in, out of breath, his cassock disheveled. "For God's sake, play it," he shouted. "Play whatever that device recorded. The truth needs to be heard before this man dies." "Father, you can't be in here during—" A guard started. "I can be wherever God calls me," Father Andrews interrupted, his voice ringing with authority that came from decades of standing between men and their deaths. "And he's calling me to witness truth today. Play the recording, Warden. Now." Eleanor Blackwood looked at the chaplain's face, at Ben's desperate eyes, at Shadow sitting at rigid attention, at Mendez sweating and panicking in the corner. She made a decision. She pressed play. Static. Then Mendez's voice, clear and damning. "Problem is the dog. That animal recognized me at the visit. I thought maybe it was coincidence, but it went straight for me. Like it remembered." Another voice, synthesized through a voice changer. "Animals don't testify in court." This one might as well. It's got Ephraim looking at me like I'm the killer. And that chaplain, Andrews, he's been asking questions. About evidence logs. About timeline inconsistencies. Can you control him? The chaplain. Maybe. But there's another problem. Detective Hoyt called me yesterday. Asked why my name was on the chain of custody for the murder weapon. Asked why it was logged before Montgomery died. Silence on the recording. Then, did you deny it? Of course I denied it. Said it must be a clerical error. But she didn't sound convinced. The room had gone deathly quiet. Every person in the execution chamber stood frozen, listening to a confession recorded by a man who'd been surveillance his own conspiracy. Mendez's voice continued. I'm telling you, this is unraveling. The execution needs to happen on schedule. Once Ephraim's dead, the questions stop. No one investigates a closed case. Agreed. Make sure there are no more delays. And Mendez, if the detective becomes a problem, I'll handle it. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Warden Blackwood looked up, her face carved from stone. Officer Mendez, you're relieved of duty. Guards, detain him immediately. Wait. Mendez backed toward the wall, his hand finally closing on his weapon. That recording is out of context. It's a confession, Ben breathed. You framed me. You killed Montgomery or helped kill him, and you framed me to cover it up. Mendez's eyes darted around the room, calculating. 6 guards. The warden. The chaplain. Ben in shackles. Shadow watching him with those knowing amber eyes. And beyond the observation window, witnesses who'd just heard everything. He was cornered. The warden reached for the red phone on the wall, the direct line to the governor's office. I'm calling an immediate halt to this execution. Mr. Ephraim, you're being removed from. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Mendez had drawn his service weapon, a Glock 22, and fired. Not at Ben, not at the warden, but at the recorder in Blackwood's hand. The device exploded into pieces of plastic and circuit board. Nobody's calling anyone, Mendez said, his voice steady now, the panic replaced by cold calculation. He swung the gun toward the warden. Step away from the phone. Luis, don't do this, Father Andrews said quietly. You're only making it worse. Worse. Mendez laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. I'm already looking at life in prison. Or worse. The people I work for don't accept failure. He glanced at the observation window where witnesses were scrambling, some ducking, some running. They've already killed to protect this secret. What's a few more bodies? Shadow growled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the room. His body coiled, ready to attack despite the gun. Shadow, stay, Ben commanded, his voice sharp. The last thing he needed was his dog shot trying to protect him. Mendez kept the gun trained on the warden, but his eyes moved to Ben. You should have just died quietly, Ephraim. Should have accepted your fate. But you had to bring that damn dog. Had to make people question. Had to. Tell the truth. Ben finished. Yeah. I'm funny that way. Innocent people tend to want justice. Justice. Mendez spat. Montgomery was going to expose a $1 billion development deal. Was going to put 50 people in prison for fraud and bribery. My cut was supposed to set me up for life. And you were just a convenient nobody in the wrong place at the wrong time. With prints you collected how? The warden asked, her voice surprisingly calm for a woman with a gun pointed at her chest. Mendez smiled bitterly. Traffic stop. 6 months before the murder. Ephraim never even knew I lifted prints from his registration. Easy to transfer to a gun when you know how. Ben's blood ran cold. He remembered that stop. Late night, coming home from a job. Officer had been friendly, professional. Had let him off with a warning for a broken taillight. Had been collecting evidence for a frame job. So what now, Luis? Father Andrews asked. You shoot us all? Murder a warden, a chaplain, and your scapegoat? How does that help you? It buys time, Mendez said. Time to run. Time to disappear before the people who paid me decide I'm more liability than asset. His finger tightened on the trigger. Sorry, Warden. Wrong place, wrong time. Just like Ephraim. Shadow barked once. Sharp, warning, and lunged. Shadow moved like lightning. 80 pounds of muscle and loyalty launching across the execution chamber. Mendez swung his gun toward the dog, but Shadow was already inside his firing arc, jaws clamping down on the officer's gun arm. Mendez screamed. The Glock discharged, the bullet punching harmlessly into the ceiling tiles. Guards rushed forward, but Shadow had already done his job. Mendez's weapon clattered to the floor, and his arm hung limp, bleeding through his uniform sleeve where the dog's teeth had found purchase. Get this animal off me. Mendez shrieked, trying to shake Shadow loose. Shadow, release. Ben commanded. The dog let go immediately, backing up but keeping himself between Mendez and Ben, hackles raised, teeth bared. Ready to attack again if needed. Mendez clutched his bleeding arm and did the only thing he could. He ran. He burst through the chamber doors into the corridor, shoving past Father Andrews, leaving a blood trail on the linoleum. Alarms began wailing. The prison's emergency lockdown protocols activated. Steel doors slamming shut throughout the facility, dividing it into secure sections. After him, Warden Blackwood shouted, but Mendez had a head start and knew this prison like the back of his hand. 2 guards sprinted after him. Then Clara Hoyt appeared, somehow freed from the holding room in the chaos, her confiscated weapon back in her hands. She locked eyes with Ben through the chamber window. Stay alive, she shouted. I'm finishing this. Then she was running too, following Mendez's blood trail through the maze of corridors. Shadow barked urgently, pulling at his lead still attached to his collar. Rita, the shelter worker who'd been standing frozen in the corner during the shooting, instinctively loosened her grip. The dog bolted, tearing after Mendez with single-minded purpose. Shadow, no. Ben called, but the dog was gone, disappearing into the corridor with the speed of an animal who'd been bred to chase down threats. Get these shackles off him, Father Andrews demanded, helping Ben to his feet. For God's sake, the man's been proven innocent. Mendez ran through the execution wing, his injured arm leaving crimson handprints on every wall he touched. Behind him, he could hear boots pounding, Clara Hoyt's voice shouting for him to stop, and the terrifying sound of a dog's claws clicking rapidly on tile. Getting closer. He burst through a security door, slamming it shut behind him. Through the reinforced window, he saw Shadow hit the door at full speed, snarling, pouring at the glass. The dog's amber eyes were locked on him with primal focus. Mendez kept running. The administrative wing. The evidence room. That's where he needed to go. The physical files, the digital records, the documentation of everything that had really happened with Montgomery, it all needed to be destroyed. If he could erase the evidence, it would be his word against a dog's reaction and a recording that no longer existed. He punched in his access code with shaking fingers. The evidence room door buzzed open. He stumbled inside, slamming it shut, engaging the magnetic lock. Safe. For the moment. The room was lined with metal shelving units holding decades of case files. In the corner, a bank of computers held digitized records. Mendez grabbed a trash can, dumped its contents, and started pulling files. Montgomery case. Red Valley development scandal. Financial records. Everything that connected him to the conspiracy. He stuffed them in the trash can, pulled out a lighter. His hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get a flame. The papers caught. Smoke began filling the small room. Mendez moved to the computers, grabbing a crowbar from the maintenance supplies. He swung hard, smashing the first monitor. Glass exploded. He hit the second, the third, destroying hard drives with manic desperation. Destroy the evidence. Destroy the truth. Start over somewhere else with a new name and whatever money he'd managed to hide away. Then he heard it, a sound that stopped him cold. Scratching. Metal on metal. Coming from the ventilation duct above the shelving unit. Mendez looked up slowly. The vent cover was moving. Scraping. Something was forcing its way through. No, he whispered. No, that's impossible. The vent cover crashed to the floor, and Shadow dropped through the opening, landing on the shelving unit with a crash of metal. The dog's eyes found Mendez immediately. "Good dog," Mendez said, backing away, raising the crowbar. "Good boy. Stay." Shadow leaped. 90 pounds of German Shepherd hit Mendez' center mass, driving him to the ground. The crowbar flew from his hands. Shadow's jaws closed on Mendez's jacket, tearing, ripping, exposing what lay beneath. A second gun. A backup piece strapped to Mendez's ankle. And a folder tucked inside his jacket, stamped in red letters. Project Red Valley. Confidential. The evidence room door exploded inward. Clara Hoyt burst through, weapon drawn, 2 prison guards flanking her. Smoke from the burning files swirled around them. "Freeze! Hands where I can see them," Clara commanded. Mendez lay pinned beneath Shadow, the dog's teeth still gripping his jacket, growling a continuous warning. Blood from his arm wound pooled on the floor. His backup gun lay exposed. The confidential folder had fallen open, documents spilling out. Financial transactions, names, dates. A conspiracy mapped out in paper and ink. "Get this dog off me," Mendez gasped. "Shadow, release," Clara said firmly. The dog let go but didn't move away. Just stood over Mendez, ready to attack again if needed. Clara holstered her weapon and pulled out handcuffs. "Luis Mendez, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, evidence tampering, attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, and about 15 other charges I'm going to enjoy writing up." She yanked his arms behind his back, not gently, and cuffed him. "You have the right to remain silent, which is ironic since you couldn't shut up on your own recording." Guards pulled Mendez to his feet. The entire confrontation had been broadcast through the prison's security cameras. Inmates pressed against their cells, watching this corrupt officer finally brought down. Word was spreading through Red Valley like wildfire. Ben Ephraim was innocent. Had been innocent all along. One of the guards grabbed the confidential folder, flipping through pages with widening eyes. "Detective, you need to see this. There are names here. Judges, prosecutors, development executives. This goes way beyond one corrupt cop." Clara took the folder, scanning quickly. Her face hardened. Project Red Valley. They weren't just covering up Montgomery's murder. They were running a systematic scheme to manipulate construction contracts, bribe officials, and eliminate anyone who threatened the operation. She looked at Mendez. "How many others? How many people did you frame or kill to protect this?" Mendez smiled through bloody teeth. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "You think this ends with me? You think arresting one cop and freeing one mechanic stops what's been built here?" He laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. "You've just started a war you can't win, detective. The people behind Project Red Valley. They have reach you can't imagine. Money, power, connections that go higher than you'll ever climb." "Then I guess we'll climb together," Clara said coldly. "Every name in this folder is going to be investigated. Every transaction traced. Every lie exposed." She nodded to the guards. "Get him out of my sight." As they dragged Mendez toward the door, he looked back at Shadow, still standing guard over the scattered evidence. "That damn dog," he muttered. "Should have put it down 5 years ago when I had the chance." Shadow's only response was a low, rumbling growl. They hauled Mendez through the corridors. Inmates cheered, banged on their cells, shouted insults at the cop who'd helped put an innocent man on death row. The walk of shame through Red Valley would be the longest of Mendez's life. Clara remained in the evidence room, Shadow at her side, both of them surrounded by the smoking remains of files Mendez had tried to destroy and the documents that would bring down everyone involved in the conspiracy. She pulled out her phone, dialed Captain Morrison. "Sir, we've got him. Mendez is in custody. And sir, this is bigger than we thought. I'm looking at evidence of a multi-million-dollar corruption scheme involving construction development, police officials, and," she flipped through more pages, "at least 2 sitting judges and an assistant district attorney." Morrison's voice was grim. "How solid is the evidence?" "Rock solid. Financial records, communications, a confidential project folder documenting the entire operation. Clara looked down at Shadow, who sat calmly beside her, tongue out, looking satisfied. And it was all recovered by a 10-year-old German shepherd who wouldn't let the truth stay buried. And Ephraim? Innocent. Completely, provably innocent. We need to expedite his release and start looking at wrongful conviction compensation. This man lost 5 years of his life because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll make the calls. Get that evidence secured and get yourself and that dog back here safely. If what you're saying is true, there are going to be some very powerful people who want this to disappear. Clara looked at the confidential folder in her hands, at the names of people who'd thought they were untouchable, at the proof that justice could be corrupted but not destroyed. Let them try, she said quietly. The truth is out now, and it's not going back in the dark. She hung up and knelt beside Shadow, scratching behind his ears. Good boy, she whispered. You saved your master. You saved all of us. Shadow's tail wagged once. Then he stood, looking toward the door, toward the execution wing where Ben was waiting, ready to go home at last. But somewhere in the prison, an anonymous call was being made. A warning sent to people whose names appeared in that confidential folder. The war Mendez had mentioned wasn't hyperbole. It was just beginning. And the people who'd built Project Red Valley had no intention of letting it fall without a fight. The governor's call came through at 6:47 a.m., 47 minutes after Ben Ephraim's scheduled execution time. Warden Eleanor Blackwood stood in her office, the red phone pressed to her ear, and for the first time in 23 years of corrections work, she wept with relief. Yes, Governor. I understand. Emergency stay granted. Full pardon pending investigation. She glanced through her office window at Ben, still in the execution chamber, surrounded by guards who no longer knew if he was prisoner or victim. I'll inform Mr. Ephraim immediately. When she entered the chamber, Ben was sitting on the floor, still in his orange jumpsuit, Shadow pressed against his side. The dog hadn't left him since Clara and the guards had returned from the evidence room. Man and animal both looked exhausted, hollowed out by 5 years of injustice and 1 night of vindication. Mr. Ephraim, the warden said, her voice softer than anyone had ever heard it. The governor has issued an emergency stay of execution. You're being released from death row, effective immediately. A full investigation is underway, but based on the evidence recovered tonight, she gestured to the confidential folder Clara held, the state is prepared to issue a formal pardon and exoneration. Ben stared at her, not quite comprehending. I'm free. You're free. The words hung in the air like something fragile, something that might shatter if spoken too loudly. Ben's throat worked, but no sound came out. He just clutched Shadow tighter, buried his face in the dog's fur, and shook with silent sobs. Father Andrews knelt beside them, placing a hand on Ben's shoulder. Justice delayed, he whispered, but not denied. God saw your innocence, son, and he sent a most unlikely angel to prove it. Shadow whined softly, licking Ben's face. Then, without warning, the dog's legs buckled. Shadow. Ben caught him as he collapsed. Shadow, what's wrong? The dog's breathing had gone shallow. His amber eyes, usually so alert, looked glazed. Blood, fresh blood, was seeping through his black fur on his side. He's hurt, Rita gasped, dropping to her knees beside them. Her hands found the wound, a gash from where Mendez had struck him with the crowbar during their struggle. Oh God, he's been bleeding this whole time. The adrenaline must have kept him going, but... Get a vet. Ben shouted. Someone get a veterinarian. Now. There's a clinic 15 minutes away, one of the guards said, already pulling out his phone. Clara knelt down, pressing her jacket against Shadow's wound to slow the bleeding. Hold on, boy. You didn't survive 5 years in a shelter just to give up now. But Shadow's eyes found Ben's face, and in them was something that looked like peace. Like a mission finally completed. His tail moved weakly, one last wag. No, Ben whispered, cradling the dog's head. No, you don't get to leave me. Not now. Not after everything. Shadow, please. The dog's tongue touched Ben's hand once. Gentle. Reassuring. You saved me again, buddy, Ben said, tears streaming down his face. You always do. You always. His voice broke completely. Shadow's breathing grew weaker. Rita checked his pulse, her face stricken. He's going into shock. The internal bleeding, there's too much trauma. Even if we get him to a vet. Try, Ben demanded. We have to try. They carried Shadow out of Red Valley on a stretcher, Ben refusing to leave his side. The veterinary clinic mobilized its emergency team. For 3 hours, they fought to save the German Shepherd who'd exposed a conspiracy and freed an innocent man. But some wounds go too deep. Some battles take everything. At 9:34 a.m., Shadow's heart stopped beating. Ben was holding him when it happened, whispering promises and apologies and gratitude into the dog's graying fur, promising that Shadow's sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten, that the truth he'd fought so hard to reveal would be heard. The veterinarian, a young woman with kind eyes, placed a hand on Ben's shoulder. I'm so sorry. We did everything we could. He fought so hard to stay with you. Ben nodded, unable to speak. He stayed with Shadow's body for another hour, just sitting on the clinic floor, remembering. The day he'd found this scarred dog at the shelter, rejected by everyone else. The nights when Shadow's weight on his chest had kept the PTSD nightmares at bay. The moment in the prison when those amber eyes had locked onto Mendez with recognition and purpose. Thank you, Ben finally whispered to the still form in his arms. Thank you for never giving up on me. The next morning's headlines blazed across every major news outlet. Dog exposes prison conspiracy. Innocent man freed after 5 years on death row. K9 hero dies saving master framed for murder. Project Red Valley. Multi-million-dollar corruption scheme unraveled by loyal dog. Ben sat in a motel room 20 miles from Red Valley, watching the news coverage on a television that seemed too bright, too loud, too real. His face was everywhere. Mendez's perp walk. Clara Hoyt describing the evidence. Father Andrews calling Shadow an instrument of divine justice. The world was celebrating Ben's freedom, demanding investigations, calling for heads to roll. But all Ben could think about was the dog-shaped absence beside him. 3 days later, on a gray morning that threatened rain, Ben stood beside a freshly dug grave on a small hill overlooking Red Valley Penitentiary. The prison had donated this plot, the warden's idea, a gesture of apology for the years stolen from him. Shadow's body lay in a simple wooden casket, a blanket Rita had brought from the shelter tucked around him. The same blanket he'd slept on for 5 years, waiting. Father Andrews said a few words. Clara attended, standing respectfully apart. Rita wept openly. Even Warden Blackwood came, representing the institution that had failed Ben but been saved by his dog. Ben placed a small plaque at the head of the grave. Bronze with Shadow's name and dates, and below them a single line. He found the truth when no one else could. You were a good boy, Ben said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. The best boy. You deserved better than what life gave you. Better than a shelter kennel. Better than a master on death row. Better than dying to prove what everyone should have believed from the start. He swallowed hard. But you never complained. Never gave up. Never stopped loving me, even when the world said I didn't deserve love. That's more than most humans ever manage. He knelt, placed his hand on the casket one last time. Rest now, Shadow. Your watch is over. You can finally rest. They lowered the casket into the earth. Ben threw the first handful of dirt. The sound of it hitting would like a door closing on the chapter of his life that Shadow had defined. When it was over, people offered condolences, promised to stay in touch, spoke of justice and investigations and rebuilding his life. Ben barely heard them. He just stood beside Shadow's grave until everyone else had gone, watching the gray sky and remembering amber eyes that had never lied to him. Finally, he walked to his truck, a loaner from a friend who'd never stopped believing in him. He needed to drive. Needed to move. Needed to figure out what freedom looked like for a man who'd been dead walking for 5 years. He opened the door and froze. On the driver's seat was a sealed manila envelope. No name. No return address. Just the envelope, placed there sometime in the last hour while he'd been at the burial. Ben's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single photograph, printed on glossy paper. It showed Shadow, sitting outside the gates of Red Valley Penitentiary, very much alive. The timestamp in the corner read 2 days after Shadow's death. Ben's blood turned to ice. The dog in the photo was unmistakable. The scar across his muzzle, the distinctive amber eyes, the way he held his head. But it couldn't be Shadow. Shadow was buried on the hill behind him. Wasn't he? Ben flipped the photo over. On the back, written in neat block letters, "Some truths refuse to stay buried. Some loyalties transcend death. We'll be in touch. A friend." Ben stood beside his truck, the photograph trembling in his hands, staring at the image of a dog that shouldn't exist. Behind him, the fresh grave. In front of him, impossible evidence. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of a dog barking. Deep, familiar, echoing across the hills like a promise or a warning. Shadow's story wasn't over. Neither was Ben's. The truth had been found. But the war Mendez had warned about was just beginning. And the people behind Project Red Valley had resources Ben couldn't imagine, including, apparently, the ability to fake a death or hide a truth so deep that even Ben wasn't sure what was real anymore. He climbed into his truck, tucking the photograph into his jacket pocket, right over his heart. "If you're still out there, boy," Ben whispered to the empty cab, "I'll find you. Whatever this is, whoever's playing games, I'll find the truth." Again. He started the engine and drove away from Red Valley, away from the grave, away from the prison that had held him for 5 years. But he couldn't drive away from the questions, or the impossible hope that somewhere, somehow, Shadow was still watching over him. Still loyal. Still protecting. Still refusing to let his master face this fight alone. 3 days after Shadow's burial, Ben Ephraim crossed the state line into Pennsylvania. He drove through the night, windows down, radio off, letting the highway noise fill the silence where a dog's breathing used to be. The media circus had become unbearable. Reporters camping outside the motel, shouting questions about how it felt to be free, what he'd do now, did he blame the system that almost killed him? He couldn't answer those questions. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Around 2 a.m., he pulled into a truck stop motel called the Restway Inn, a squat building with flickering neon and the kind of anonymity that suited a man trying to disappear. The night clerk barely glanced at him as he paid cash for 3 nights. Room 14. 2nd floor. Corner unit with a view of the parking lot and the dark tree lane beyond. Ben dropped his duffel bag on the worn carpet and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. Free hands. No shackles. No guards. No countdown to execution. Just hands that didn't know what to do with freedom anymore. The photograph from Shadow's grave sat on the nightstand. He'd looked at it 100 times during the drive, trying to understand. The timestamp. The impossibility of it. The message on the back. Some truths refuse to stay buried. What did that mean? Who had sent it? And why? Ben lay back on the bed without undressing, exhaustion finally catching up to him. For 5 years, he'd slept in 30-minute increments, always alert, always aware that death row was a place where violence could come from any direction. Now, in this motel room, he should feel safe. But he didn't. The knock came at 3:17 a.m. 3 sharp raps on the door. Ben jerked awake, heart hammering, instinct screaming. He approached the door carefully, peered through the peephole. Empty hallway. No one there. He opened the door a crack, keeping the chain engaged. Nothing. Just the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the distant sound of highway traffic. Then he looked down. A brown envelope lay on the doormat. Manila. Unsealed. Just like the one in his truck. Ben picked it up with trembling hands, closed the door, locked it. He turned on every light in the room before opening the envelope. 2 items fell onto the bed. The first was a photograph. Shadow sitting outside the gates of Red Valley Penitentiary, his black fur almost invisible against the night except for those distinctive amber eyes, glowing in the camera flash like coins of fire. The dog sat at attention, alert, watchful, protecting something. Or someone. The timestamp. 11:47 p.m. Last night. 5 days after Shadow died. Ben's hands shook so hard he almost dropped the photo. The second item was a handwritten note. Block letters in black ink on plain white paper. He's still guarding you. Ben stared at the words until they blurred. This wasn't possible. He'd held Shadow's body. Felt the stillness. Watched them lower the casket into the ground. Dogs don't come back from the dead. So what was this? A hoax? A threat? Someone's sick idea of psychological warfare? Or something else entirely? Ben moved to the window, pulled back the curtain. The parking lot stretched below, mostly empty at this hour. His truck sat in the pool of light from a street lamp. Beyond the lot, a narrow 2-lane road. Beyond that, a wall of pine trees shrouded in mist. And in that mist, barely visible, 2 yellow eyes watched back. Ben's breath caught. The eyes were too high off the ground to be a raccoon or fox. Too steady to be a trick of the light. They just sat there, unblinking, focused on his window with laser precision. Shadow. Ben whispered. The eyes didn't move. Didn't blink. Just watched. Ben pressed his hand against the cold glass. Tears streamed down his face. Whether from grief or hope or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. Maybe all three. Guess I'm not alone after all, he said softly. Behind him, the motel television flickered to life on its own. Ben spun around. He hadn't touched the remote. Hadn't even turned the TV on since entering the room. But now the screen glowed, showing the late-night news, volume low but audible. A reporter stood outside Red Valley Penitentiary, crime scene tape visible behind her. Shocking development tonight as another official connected to the Project Red Valley scandal has been found dead. Gregory Whitman, the former assistant district attorney who prosecuted Benjamin Ephraim, was discovered in his home earlier this evening. Police are calling it a suicide, but sources close to the investigation say the circumstances are suspicious. The screen cut to footage of a house surrounded by police cars. Then to a photo of Whitman from his prosecution days. Confident, polished, the face of justice. The face of a man who'd helped send Ben to death row knowing he was innocent. This marks the third death connected to the conspiracy, the reporter continued. Last week, prison guard Luis Mendez was found dead in his holding cell, officially ruled a suicide, though many question how a man under constant surveillance could have. Ben turned off the TV manually, cutting the reporter off mid-sentence. His mind raced. 3 deaths. Mendez. Whitman. Who was the third? And more importantly, who was cleaning up loose ends? The people behind Project Red Valley were tying off threads. Eliminating anyone who might testify, might talk, might expose the full scope of the conspiracy. Mendez had warned them. You've just started a war you can't win. Maybe he'd been right. Ben returned to the window. The yellow eyes were still there, watching from the tree lane. Guarding. As if Shadow, or whatever Shadow had become, was standing sentinel against threats Ben couldn't yet see. He looked down at the photograph again. The note. He's still guarding you. Someone knew Shadow hadn't really died. Or had arranged for him not to die. Or was using the dog's image to send Ben a message. You're not safe. You're never going to be safe. We can reach you anywhere. But why? If they wanted him dead, they'd had 5 years to do it. Why fake Shadow's death only to resurface him as some kind of ghostly protector? Unless. Ben's blood ran cold as understanding crystallized. Shadow hadn't died. The veterinary clinic. The heroic efforts to save him. The body in the casket. It had all been theater. Someone had switched the body. Someone had taken Shadow. Kept him alive. But who? And why? To control me, Ben realized. To make sure I don't dig too deep. To remind me they can take away what I love whenever they want. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe someone was protecting Shadow. Keeping him hidden. Using his image to let Ben know that there were allies in this war. People working behind the scenes to expose Project Red Valley completely. The knock on the door came again. 3 sharp raps. Ben grabbed the only weapon he had, a tire iron from his truck. He approached the door, looked through the peephole. Still no one. He opened it anyway, tire iron raised. The hallway was empty. But on the floor, another envelope. Smaller this time. No markings. Ben picked it up, tore it open. Inside was a single business card. Detective Clara Hoyt, Major Crimes Division, call me. Trust no one else. A phone number was written in pen on the back. Ben closed the door, locked it, engaged every security mechanism the cheap motel offered. Then he dialed. Clara answered on the first ring. Ephraim. How did you know where I was? I didn't. I sent that card to 12 different motels across 3 states, hoping you'd surface at one of them. A pause. You got the photographs, didn't you? Of Shadow. Ben's grip tightened on the phone. You sent them. No. But I know who did. Ben, you need to listen very carefully. Project Red Valley wasn't just about construction fraud. It was a testing ground, a proof of concept for corrupting entire judicial systems. The people at the top, the ones whose names weren't in Mendez's folder, they're burning evidence. Which means burning people. Whitman, Ben said. I saw the news. Whitman, Mendez, and Judge Carlton Pierce, the judge who presided over your trial, found dead yesterday. They're calling it a heart attack, but the man was 48 and ran marathons. Clara's voice dropped. Ben, they're cleaning house. And you're a loose end. Then why am I still breathing? Because you're more useful alive. For now. As long as you don't push too hard, don't ask too many questions, you're proof the system works. Wrongfully convicted man exonerated, justice served, everyone moves on. Her voice hardened. But the moment you start digging into who really killed Montgomery and why, you become a problem. And problems get solved permanently. Ben looked back at the window. The yellow eyes were gone. Just mist and darkness and the lonely highway beyond. What about Shadow? He asked quietly. The photographs. The note. Is he alive? Clara was silent for a long moment. I don't know. But I think someone wants you to believe he is. Whether as a threat or a promise, I can't tell yet. I need to know the truth. The truth will get you killed, Clara said bluntly. Ben, take the win. You're free. Start over. Disappear. Let me and the federal investigators handle. No. Ben's voice was steel. Shadow didn't spend 5 years waiting for me to walk away from the truth. He died, or didn't die, proving my innocence. I owe him more than running. You owe him survival, Clara countered. That's what he fought for. Your life. Don't waste it on revenge. It's not revenge, Ben said. It's justice. Real justice. Not the corrupted version that almost killed me. He looked at the photograph of Shadow one more time. I'm going to find out who killed Montgomery and why. I'm going to expose everyone involved in Project Red Valley. And I'm going to find my dog, whether he's alive, dead, or something in between. Then you're going to need help, Clara said after a pause. And Ben, watch your back. Because I guarantee someone's watching you right now. She hung up. Ben moved to the window one more time, looking down at the parking lot. A car sat in the shadows at the far edge of the lot. Dark sedan. Too nice for this motel. Someone sat in the driver's seat, just a silhouette, but something about the posture screamed law enforcement. Or military. Someone used too long surveillances. As Ben watched, the figure raised something to his face. Binoculars. Or a camera. The streetlight caught a glint of metal on the man's chest. A badge. Prison guard uniform. Someone from Red Valley. Watching. Waiting. The war Mendez had warned about wasn't coming. It was already here. Ben closed the curtain, turned off the lights, and sat in the darkness with the photograph of a dog that shouldn't exist and the knowledge that his freedom was just another kind of prison. But this time, he wasn't fighting alone. Somewhere out there, Shadow was waiting. Watching. Guarding. And somewhere else, the truth was waiting too. Buried under corruption and lies and 5 years of injustice. Ben Ephraim had spent 5 years on death row for a murder he didn't commit. Now he was going to spend however long it took to expose the people who'd put him there. And this time, He had nothing left to lose. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed the story, you will surely love the next. Click on the image or video showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.